Hello, my name is Johnny Stanton. I spent 5 years in and out of the NFL as a fullback, mostly with the Cleveland Browns. And one of my favorite things about being in the NFL was the perspective that it offered me. I got to be in the locker room surrounded by guys from around the country, oftentimes around the globe, from different economic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, and different interests. You know, sometimes you can forget when you see guys on the screen that they're their own individual, with their own hopes, with their own dreams, with their own passions. And it's that passion that I really want to dive into today. Because I am under the impression that our pursuit of success should not be so single-minded as to overshadow our pursuit of our passion. I am the person I am today, and I attribute much of my success and the ability to get to the NFL in the first place because I was able to work on myself as a whole and on my interests and passions outside of football. I am an athlete, but to be the best athlete possible, I had to become a public speaker. I had to become a multitasker, a storyteller, a leader. And all of these skills, yes, I developed them while playing football, but I also developed them when I was becoming a writer. I became a better athlete when I was becoming an entrepreneur. I was learning how to become a better teammate by uplifting my fellow athletes in the LGBTQ community. And I was learning how to cope and deal with the stresses and adversities that football inflicted on my life when I became a huge nerd. All of these things come together to develop me into a more well-rounded person. And all that started on one night, September 21st, 2012. This was the 5th game of my high school senior season. And early in the first quarter, I was running a QB draw up the middle and got tackled at the knee. I immediately knew something was wrong, and I found out the next day that I had torn my ACL. But none of that mattered at the time because we had a game to win. So I went on to throw for 2 touchdown passes, run for 1. We ultimately got the victory after playing in the whole game. And in doing so, I also tore my meniscus and suffered a mild concussion as well. Now, I tell you this because I think it shows my dedication to the sport and the fact that I was willing to risk my own livelihood to be able to continue playing it, but also because I think it makes me sound kind of tough. For those of you who don't know, an ACL injury means your season is over. You get surgery, and for the next 6 to 9 months, you are in rehabilitation. But this was my senior year. I was the quarterback for the #1 team in the country at the time, and we were just coming off a California high school championship. And I was at rehab while the rest of my team was on the practice field, and I didn't really know how to process that. In fact, my senior year I had a bit of an identity crisis. The first time a huge part of my identity had been taken away from me. You know, I consider those 6 months recovering from my ACL injury as some of the most important months of my life. I had to go through a journey of self-discovery to find out who I was without the overwhelming presence of football in my life. I had to find out that when you identify as an athlete, you have to find out who you are when that gets taken away from you. I had to fill that void with something. It just so happened I filled that void with tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. This isn't a TED Talk explaining to you the benefits about D&D or how many of the world's most influential creatives grew up playing the game. This is about the power of discovering your and how it helped me and influenced the rest of my life. Let's start off with my first and, athlete. I was raised on sports. I was parented by 2 college athletes. As a born and bred Los Angelino, I lived and died with the Dodgers and Lakers. After school every day, I was whisked away to oftentimes multiple sports practices, and the school year wasn't broken up into fall, winter, and spring. It was broken up into football season, basketball season, and baseball season. But it was football that I ultimately fell in love with. As a football player, I am no stranger to injury. I had 4 season-ending injuries throughout my football career, and each one of them had a huge impact on the rest of my life. As you heard, I tore my ACL my senior year of high school, and that ended up causing me to have to transfer away 2 years later from the school that I had committed to out of high school, the University of Nebraska. The school that I then transferred to, UNLV, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, I ended up getting injured again. And from that, I had to learn how to play other positions and give up the position that I had grown up loving and creating a passion for, quarterback. 2 years later, in 2018, I found myself on the Minnesota Vikings, and during my rookie year, in the second preseason game, I broke my ankle. And that was after beating the odds in the first place by making the Vikings as an undrafted tryout player after switching positions again. And then finally, in August of 2022, I got cut for the final time in the NFL after separating my shoulder. And those are just the season-ending injuries. I have bruised bones, I have broken ribs, I have sprained ligaments, I've suffered concussions, you name it, I've probably had it. And that's nothing to say about the 6 times I was cut from the NFL. All this adversity taught me a lot about myself and taught me what I actually love about football. I learned that I must love the game a lot to be able to fight back from each one of these injuries, each one of these times getting cut, and have to redouble my efforts to be able to make it back to anywhere close to where I was before. Anytime I get the opportunity to speak to high school students, this is really what I try to hammer home. You have to look at yourself in the mirror anytime you are away from the game and make sure that you really love it. You have to reevaluate your love for the game because you cannot roll through rehab. You have to be able to recommit yourself even more than you were before. Another thing that I learned about myself going through this adversity from injuries and being cut is that I am highly adaptable. You heard that I played quarterback in high school and in college, but to be able to continue playing, I had to switch positions. So I learned how to play linebacker, I played some special teams, and to be able to make the NFL as a fullback, I actually had to try out for the Minnesota Vikings as a tight end. And then when all was said and done, after I got cut from the NFL for the final time, I spent 12 straight months working out 5 days a week at long snapper, a position that I'd never played before, just to be able to get one last chance to make it into the NFL again. Now, this adaptability is something that I grew to rely on, and I think was a main reason why I spent as much time in the NFL as I did. In the NFL, there's a saying, the more you can do. It represents the amount of skills that you can have to make you that much more valuable, that much more indispensable to the team that you're on, and make it less likely that they try to replace you because you're that much more valuable than the next guy. This can cause me to raise my hand and let coach know, hey, I threw for 3,400 yards my junior year of college. When the special teams coach is asking for guys to try out at long snapper to find out who our backup is going to be that season, I throw my hand up as quickly as possible because the more you can do, even though I've never snapped a game in my life. All of these skills that I was developing, all of these ways of using the more you can do, ended up having a large influence in the rest of my life because all of these things I was loving about football, the purpose, the drive, the story that being on a team tells, and the fact that when you step foot on the field, no one can tell you, no one knows what is going to happen before you step off. All these things that I loved about football, I found out I loved about Dungeons and Dragons too. You see, I live for a story, both being the storyteller and being told a story. I love it when somebody pulls me aside to be able to say what they're incredibly nerdy about and can talk for hours about. Because a common refrain of mine is that being nerdy about something is just synonymous with being passionate about something. And I live for passion. That person who is telling you the story of their passions and what they're nerdy about is sharing the stories that help shape their identity. And that can be an incredibly intimate thing. They're sharing with you things that you will help grow closer with them about. And they're sharing their perspective, both about the world and of you. But perspective can be a funny thing. It can be dangerous at times. We get told to stay in your lane. Don't stray too far from what other people know you as, from what the world knows you're good at. Athletes get told, shut up and dribble, when we veer too far away from being easily digestible. This can cause many athletes to feel like their value comes from what they can do physically as opposed to what they can do mentally. And this can have detrimental effects of athletes not knowing how to develop themselves outside of their sport and maybe not knowing what they want to do after their athletic career ultimately comes to an end. We get told that if we don't commit ourselves 100% of our time, effort, and dedication to being the best player possible, then we will be a failure. If you're not 100% one thing, you will fail. But what if being more than one thing is what caused me to be a special player in the first place? Because I'm at the very least two things, which brings me to my second and, nerd. I found myself falling deeper and deeper into the nerd culture as my football career went on. Started off with comic books, and it got to a point where I had read so much Batman and Walking Dead that I was falling in love with the characters and the worlds on the page. So much to the extent that I wanted to create my own characters and my own worlds, which naturally led me to Dungeons & Dragons. It occurs to me that not everybody here might not know what Dungeons & Dragons is. To put it simply, D&D is a game that allows friends to gather around a table to collaboratively tell a story with the help of some dice. Yes, it's super nerdy. And yes, that's what makes it so great. Full commitment to looking silly while talking in a bad British accent about your character's tragic backstory. You see, I live right in the middle of the intersection of jock and nerd on the Venn diagram. And for a while, I thought I was alone, until I decided to take the leap to try to create a brand out of the two. And it turns out a lot of people share those same two interests as well. From that point on, I had a Sports Illustrated article written about my D&D group, which included All-Pro guard Wyatt Teller and this year's NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. ESPN then reached out and wanted to do a story on us on SportsCenter, the Heathens, the Browns D&D club, and it very heavily featured my amateurishly painted miniatures. And I got to grow closer and become friends with a lot of people in the community that I admire that call themselves D&D nerds as well. You see, I made my brand. And I was able to create a second career out of helping other people discover their and as well. I recently started my podcast, Athletics Check, which interviews athletes about their and helps them lean into their and create a brand out of it. Because that's what can make them special, and that's what can create opportunities outside of their sport. The moment I start talking about D&D on the internet, I became the D&D football guy. And I was pulling from two separate demographics to be able to do that. And that's the benefit of this. I was making NFL fans out of D&D nerds. I was making D&D nerds out of NFL fans. And all of this work on my brand helped me take advantage when the stars were on alignment on October 21st, 2021. On that Thursday night football matchup, the Cleveland Browns, my team, was facing off against the Denver Broncos. It just so happened to line up with the Campaign 3 premiere of the world's most famous D&D group, a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors called Critical Role. Now, their Campaign 3 premiere was a big deal. There were movie theaters rented out across the country, sold out across the country. It was similar to a Marvel movie premiere. And even though I was a little bit bummed that I wasn't going to be partaking in the festivities that night, I had something that was just a little bit more important. I was making the third start of my NFL career. So I still wanted to be part of the celebration. So I wore my Critical Role shirt and jacket to the stadium that night. And in the picture that everybody gets in the tunnel in the stadium, I took that picture, posted on the internet before the game with the caption, "Is it Thursday yet?" A subtle nod to the critters out there. Long story short, in the third quarter of that game, I catch a flat route to the left side of the goal line and run in my first and only touchdown in my NFL career. Right in front of the dog pound, my body erupts in emotion. We end up winning the game, the celebration ensues, and friends, family, fans are texting and tweeting me after the game their congratulations. But it wasn't just friends, family, and fans, it was also members of the D&D community, for my post had gone viral, and members of the Critical Role itself were messaging me after the game. Even though D&D was the last thing on my mind that night, as I crossed the end zone, the D&D community was rallying around me as a fellow nerd. All in all, I find it incredibly important to stay curious and to continue to explore what you're passionate about. There are too many people today who don't find the time to spend on their passions. Or maybe they haven't found a new passion in a long time. Even worse, there are people in these communities that are passionate about these communities who have learned to gatekeep them, to keep them from changing. But gone are the days of the jocks versus nerds, high school comedy rivalries. That binary doesn't exist, and we can be more than one thing. I wish I could say it was easy to develop an and as a professional athlete. The NFL is a cutthroat business, and any wrong move can get you released. This can cause guys to turtle up in their shell, to make their persona only about what they do on the field, even if their rich, fulfilling life outside of football can create even more opportunity for them. Front offices can see anything as a weakness, or that the next guy up might be more dedicated than you are. But only when I found true fulfillment in everything outside of football as well as football was when I became the best athlete I could be and the best well-rounded person I could be. I still love football with all my heart. This March marks 19 months since I was last on a team. And I'm still not technically retired because most people don't get the opportunity to do that. Whether it's through lack of talent, injury, bad luck, any of the combination of those three, the powers that be have decided that I am no longer an active NFL player. But I am okay with that at this point. Even though every morning that I don't wake up at an ungodly hour to make it on time to a meeting, to prepare for a game that I'm not going to be in, or shedding blood, sweat, and tears on a field that I won't see on Sunday, a part of me dies. But the fact that I had developed these skills and this life outside of football allowed me to hit the ground running at this point outside of football. Everyone here is a nerd about something. After all, being a nerd just means you're passionate. So let those passions guide you to a life that is more fulfilling and filled with opportunity that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Take the helm and tell the world what you are nerdy about.